What is happening, guys? Jeff back here with Xylus once again. We are moving along with Project Xylus. Still working on these flares. It's been a long project, very long project. I started it in March, I think, but we are still fighting the good fight on these flares. But the end result's going to be wonderful. I have no doubt about that. So I have not lost my passion for it, or my gumption, whatever you want to call it. I've not lost that. So as I mentioned in my last video, I had to take a pretty good sizable break from the project, about a month and a half, in which I didn't touch the car at all. But it was a good thing, to be completely honest, because it allowed me to come back to the project after that time and take a really good fresh look at everything that I'd done to that point. The rear flares were completed when I left off. The driver's side and the passenger side were both finished. It allowed me to just take a good look and see if there was anything at all that I wanted to modify or change before moving on with the project. And sure enough, I came to the conclusion that it just wasn't wide enough. It wasn't wide enough for what I was going for. I never wanted it to be super overly wide, like a Rocket Bunny type of wide, but it just wasn't quite wide enough for the look that I was going for. So I decided to just go ahead and widen it out. And I didn't want to do a lot of extra width. I just wanted to do like a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch at the most. They were 2 inches wide when I first did them, and I wanted to extend them out to 2½ inches, or just over 2½ inches, which is about 63.5 millimeters. Kind of a nice middle ground between super exaggerated width, like Rocket Bunny or raw welt type of width, and what I had previously. So I went ahead and did it pretty quickly. In about 1 week, I did the other side, just kind of blitzed it, just widened it out, and it turned out wonderful. I really like it. I'll put a little preview of it right here in the corner so you guys can see. I got some really nice angles out of the edges of the flare in the front and the rear, and the sidewall just turned out super slick, really nice. I love the final result of the widened flares. So we're now over here on the driver's side, going to be doing the exact same thing as I did on the passenger side. Now, I did not do any recording whatsoever of the other side when I widened it out. You know, just being honest, I wasn't mentally there when I was doing that. I was still kind of going through a lot, and for one reason or the other, I just didn't turn the camera on. But I am turning the camera on and showing you this side right here, so you're not going to miss out on too much. Now, unfortunately, I did already do the first part of the process, which is laying up the new sidewall and the 2 layers of fiberglass cloth on here. And I wish I'd have turned the camera on to show you guys that part too, but you really didn't miss all that much. Really, all I did was I took some timber, some wood, this wood right here, which is what I had on the ground, and I had the measuring tape on the wood. I was looking around in my garage for something that would make it easy for me to extend these flares out by about a ½ inch, and I just happened to look down on the ground and see this piece of timber here. And so it's perfectly, you can see about a ½ inch, about a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch wide right there. So I laid that up against the original sidewall on the flare, and I measured it and everything, and I took a really good look at it, where it was sitting compared to the wheel and all that, and I decided that's about the perfect amount of width right there that I want to add to it. So I just went ahead and went to work, and I started cutting up this piece of wood. 8 or 9 pieces of segments that I cut with my Dremel. I just cut the segments like that, and then I just super glued them to the sidewall right here, and then I sanded down the top portion so that there wasn't any real sharp edges. It rounded out the top portion, and then I covered the wood in packing tape really well, because I didn't want the fiberglass to be sticking to the wood. If you don't protect the wood, the fiberglass is going to stick to that wood, and you're never going to get it out. You're never going to separate that wood from the fiberglass. The fiberglass is just going to crack. So I thoroughly covered the wood in packing tape. The fiberglass will separate from the packing tape, no problem. You'll be able to get that wood out of there, because we don't want the wood in the flare. That's definitely not, we don't want to keep that wood. The wood's got to go. All it's doing is creating that space and that little bit of extra width on the sidewall right there. We are going to end up taking the flare off once this is all body filled and everything. We've body filled this crease. We're going to end up taking it off and removing all that wood and cutting out the original sidewall that's in there. We don't need that anymore. This piece of fiberglass right here is going to become our new sidewall. That's basically all it was. I just super glued my wood segments on there, just kind of like that, in the shape of the wheel well, as you can see. And then I just did a good thorough sanding with a low grit sandpaper right here to rough up the surface of the flare so I could get a nice grippy surface for my fiberglass on the flare portion. And I was careful not to cover the flare itself with the packing tape because we don't want the fiberglass to come off of the flare. We wanted that to stick really hard to the flare right there. So I just took my packing tape up to the very edge of the wood right there, and I was careful not to get any on the flare. So that's all we did. We just roughed it up and then we did our fiberglassing. Our wood was covered with the packing tape, and I went ahead and just did up 2 layers of fiberglass cloth. Now this is, I believe, a 6.5 ounce fiberglass cloth. It's really nice and sturdy stuff, very strong. I've always had a good result with it. So 6.5 ounce cloth, 2 layers, gets you a really nice strong base to work with. And then we're gonna go ahead and body fill it, get the top all looking real nice, and then we will get rid of all the excess stuff that's hanging down off the edges that you cannot currently see. You'll see that momentarily. And then we're going to do some clay work to connect the edges through to the sides. You'll see that also. We'll be doing that with clay, as I explained briefly in the last video as well. And that's going to be it. Not a particularly difficult thing to do at all. It's just basic fiberglassing, basic body filling skills. Not anything overly complicated. The hardest part of this, I would say, is probably the Dremel work that you have to do on the inside of the flare. After the surface is looking really good, we got to take it off the car, flip it over, and do a lot of work on the inside to, as I said, get the wood out, cut out the original sidewall. We're going to need to cut out the corners on both sides where we are now extending the new sidewall to the original base. You're going to see what I'm talking about. But that takes some time because you got to cut that out on the inside. You got to sand it out. We got to get the clay out of there and hollow it out, and then we got to re-glass the inside to double up the strength. You'll see what I'm talking about, but there's going to be a lot of sanding, a lot of cutting, a lot of filling, but yeah, we'll get it done. We'll get this thing looking real nice. It's not going to be too terribly hard at all to match the symmetry with the other side on this. We're not going to need to go in with any symmetry ribs or anything like that with this one because we're just following the same shape. Both flares have the same basic shape, and we're just going to be following that same shape with our sandpaper, and it's going to naturally fall into the exact same symmetrical shape because we're following the shape of the wheel well. It's kind of hard to explain, but we shouldn't have any issues whatsoever reaching symmetry on both sides, so I'm not worried about that at all. This video is going to be kind of different than some of the ways I've done it before. I'm not going to be talking as I'm working. I'm just going to go ahead and record myself as I'm working, and then I may overlay a commentary track over the top of the video footage just to kind of explain what I'm doing. But I find that it's better that I can just focus on my work and I don't have to be worried about talking into the camera and all that. So I will periodically chime in on a commentary track and let you guys know what I'm doing if I feel the need. But that's about it for the introduction. Let's get to work on this. I don't have all night to work on this, so I may not get it complete in one night. So if you suddenly see me change clothes in the middle of the project, that's why. I may have to call it because I don't have a lot of time tonight, but I'm going to get as much done as I possibly can. Thanks so much for tuning into this video, guys. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. All right, so here we are the next day. I was able to accomplish quite a bit last night, so I'm very happy about that. We have the basic shape set into the flare after several applications, heavy applications of body filler. I then took my different kinds of sandpaper, including a sanding block and two different types of the sandpaper, the soft and the firm, and then a heavy grit and a light grit sandpaper to go ahead and detail out, do the first stages of detailing to get that curve in there. So we have the basic shape to go on. From this point forward, it's just going to be a matter of refinement, filling out any hollows that exist. As I run my hand along the curve here, I can feel some hollows. I want it to be perfect. You know, the perfectionist in me is just going to fight me the whole time. And so I'm going to keep on filling and doing light filler applications until this thing is perfectly seamless all the way through. And you will not be able to tell where the original flare ended and the filled areas began by the time I'm done with this. Along this connection area right here, we're just going to add a very thin application of filler. We're moving on to just filler itself. We no longer need to use Bondo glass at this point. As we were before, we were mixing the two to get a little bit of a firmer type of a filler. But now, because we're just doing the surface stuff, we're just going to be using straight Bondo. Refinement is of course the longest part of this, but I'm going to cut a lot of it out so it doesn't take too much time. I don't want this video to drag on too long. But we're going to get this curve refined really well and start on some of the details through the edges here. After that's finished, we're going to go ahead and take the flare off the car, get the wood out of there, and start our process on cutting away some of this sidewall. This is obviously far more material than we need. We're not going to be running these huge 2-inch sidewalls right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a template on the other side. I'm going to take some packing tape and I'm going to tape up the sidewall on the other side from the front to the back. Then I'm going to take a Sharpie marker and I'm going to trace along the curve, the line right here on the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to peel the packing tape all in one off, and then I'm going to cut that template out. I'm then going to reverse it, stick it onto this one right here, and match this line perfectly to the template. And then I will Sharpie marker and trace the exact size of the sidewall from the other side onto this one. And then we will go ahead and do our cutting to cut away all of the sidewall here. But of course we will need to have gotten the wood out of there first before we can do that. We can't cut the sidewall without getting the wood out. So first order of business, let's go ahead and start doing our applications, our light applications of body filler, just to refine this curve a little bit more. We're making great progress. Again, thanks for watching. Let's get moving. Alright, so this thing is really starting to take the proper shape. I'm very happy with it. I still have a lot of sanding yet to do, but I've got most of the body filler that I'm going to want to add to this thing set in there, and it's just a matter of sending that shape in. You can see the curve is really looking quite good, all the way from the back through to the front, looking really sharp. So just a little bit more sanding as I let this final layer of body filler cure on there, and then we're going to go ahead and move into getting the sidewall cut to the proper shape. Now, as I had mentioned previously, in order to do that, I'm first going to need to make a template on the other side, because I want the sidewalls to be matching exactly on both sides, the exact same size, or width rather, on both sides. It has to be perfect. So I love using templates to get symmetry. It's a great classic method to get symmetry. So the way I do that is, I'm going to show you on the other side of the car. So here on the other side of the car, I'm going to show you how I go about getting my template for the sidewall here. Here's our previously completed flare. This is on the passenger side. So you can see I've laid up packing tape all the way across the sidewall from the back all the way to the front. And this is about 3 layers of packing tape right here. You want it nice and thick on there so that when you pull it off, it all comes off in one piece. Now what I did is I went ahead and took a Sharpie marker and marked the exact lines that I need to replicate on the other side. You can see we have the upper line here, and then we have the bottom line here. And I also went ahead and traced some of the details over here on the edges as well, because we want to replicate this as closely as possible on the other side. And what this template is going to allow me to do is match up not only the curve through the top, but it's going to match up the connecting areas through the back and through the front as well. It'll just get very, very close. Still may not be absolutely 100% perfect, but it will be damn close. Now that we have the 3 layers laid up and we have it traced out, we have our lines traced out, I'm going to go ahead and peel this off the car. And we got to get rid of the adhesive back on it because we don't want the sticky side on the back, because we're going to end up turning this thing around so that it matches the other side, the opposite side. And in order to get rid of the adhesive, I'm just going to rub dust and stuff on the adhesive so that it loses its tackiness. And then we will go ahead and lay it up on the other side and see just how close of a match we have. Now I'm not expecting it to match perfectly right at the moment. There's always usually a little bit of adjustment to do, but it may match up quite closely. This curve, like I mentioned earlier, it kind of sets in automatically. The symmetry is really only going to go a certain way when you're matching this wheel well curve right here. So it should match up. The sidewall should match up quite well. But if it doesn't, we'll just make any necessary adjustments. We'll sand down the lines, or we'll add body filler, whatever we need to do. You know, but it should match up really darn close. Now once we have the template matched on there and we match this top line perfectly, we'll go ahead and trace it out along the bottom line, and then that's where we're going to go ahead and cut all this extra material off right here. We don't need this extra material, and in fact we need to get rid of that before we can start our clay layup to start matching on the sides.